I'd seen her before I ever really saw her. Passing on the stairs, fumbling for keys, that soft shuffle of grocery bags at odd hours. But that morning, at the laundromat 2 blocks away, was the first time I noticed her in a way that felt heavier. The place smelled faintly of detergent and old coins. Machines hummed in unison, spinning socks and silence. I usually came early, before anyone else, but she was already there, leaning against the folding table, thumbing the corner of a paperback. Her thermos sat beside her. Same one she carried on the stairs. She looked up once, then back to the page. I hesitated, stuffing shirts into a washer too quickly, like I was covering for nerves. A sock slipped. I bent to grab it, and caught her glance again, brief but direct. Like she'd been watching without meaning to. "Always rushing," she said, not looking up this time. Her voice was low, casual, but it landed like a hand brushing across my shoulder. I smiled awkwardly. "Or maybe just bad at laundry." She let the corner of her mouth lift, just barely, and went back to her book. That was it. A fragment of an exchange. But I couldn't stop replaying the sound of it, even while I poured in too much detergent. By the second cycle, I found myself noticing small things. The way she folded each finished shirt with deliberate, almost mechanical care. How her thumb lingered at the rim of her thermos before each sip. She didn't rush, not like me. She occupied time differently. I glanced at my phone, opened a half-written text to no one in particular, then locked the screen again. Pointless. No one was waiting for me. When she finally closed her book and straightened her pile of clothes, I thought that was it. She'd leave, and I'd keep staring at the blank spin of my dryer. But just before she moved toward the door, another woman entered. Younger. Dark hair tied back, brisk steps like she had somewhere else to be. "Finally," she muttered, tossing a load into a machine. Then she looked at me, really looked, and smirked. "You look nervous." The words were sharp, teasing. I laughed once, too fast, then glanced at my neighbor, her. She raised her brows slightly, like she wanted to hear what I'd say. "Only because you look dangerous," I answered, half under my breath, eyes dropping to the floor. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't even planned. But something flickered between us then, the cousin's laugh, her silence, the hum of the machines filling in what I couldn't. They left together, voices low in the parking lot. I stayed behind, staring at the machines as if they might explain what just happened. My clothes were still damp, but I packed them anyway, restless. When I stepped outside, the lot was empty. Just the faint echo of their footsteps down the block. I thought that would be the end of it. Another half-encounter I'd tuck away, replaying later when I shouldn't. But when I got home, a small slip of paper was wedged under my door. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate. Just a line. "You didn't fold your shirts." No name. No number. Only that. I stood there in the hallway, clothes still damp in the basket at my feet, rereading the note until the words blurred. For the first time in a long time, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like mine alone. The note stayed on my desk for 2 days. I read it between meals, between half-hearted stints at my laptop. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for it without thinking, as if it were a reminder of something I hadn't yet defined. On the third evening, I heard a knock, 2 short raps, like someone unwilling to wait. I opened the door to find her standing there, holding a grocery bag. "You left this on the dryer," she said. Inside was one of my shirts, folded neatly. I almost laughed. "You didn't have to, clearly I did," she cut in, a shadow of a smile tugging at her lips. Then she glanced past me into my apartment. "You don't keep much light on." I shrugged, awkward. "Didn't notice." "People notice more than they admit." She set the bag down just inside the door, then paused. "Do you have tea?" I did, though it was the cheap kind. She didn't seem to care. She sat at my small table, hands wrapped around the mug, as if the warmth mattered more than the taste. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't casual either. She noticed the loose sketchbook half buried under a stack of bills and pulled it closer. "You draw?" Not really, I muttered. But she flipped it open anyway. Lines of unfinished faces, corners of rooms, her thermos once, though I'd pretended it wasn't hers at the time. She studied a page longer than I could stand. Finally, she said quietly, "My husband used to draw. Before he stopped being my husband." The words fell in with the hum of the fridge. I didn't ask questions. I only nodded, though my chest tightened. "Do you still see him?" "No." She sipped her tea, eyes fixed on the mug. "And that's the point." Her honesty startled me. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't, but because it was offered so easily, like I hadn't earned it. I kept thinking about the risk, though. She was easily twice my age. My neighbor. And the cousin from the laundromat. What if she told someone? I pictured whispers in the stairwell, judgment I couldn't explain away. But sitting across from her, watching her thumb circle the rim of her cup, I didn't feel like a boy caught where he shouldn't be. I felt seen. She noticed my gaze and tilted her head. "You're quiet." "Just listening." "To what?" I almost said to you, but stopped myself. Instead, I shrugged. When she stood to leave, she lingered at the door. My shirt was still folded in the bag between us. She pressed it into my hands, her fingers brushing mine, light, deliberate, almost testing. It was nothing. Just a handover of cotton and fabric. But the warmth stayed long after the door clicked shut. It became a kind of pattern. Not daily, not predictable, but often enough to matter. Sometimes she'd knock late at night with leftover soup in a small container. Other times I'd carry her groceries upstairs when I caught her on the stairs. Each time felt ordinary. But never ordinary enough. One evening, she asked me to help fix a stubborn lamp in her living room. The cord was frayed. The light flickered, casting half-shadows across the walls. I crouched near the socket, fiddling with the plug, while she hovered close, holding the base steady. Too close. I could smell the faint trace of her shampoo, something clean and sharp. "You're good at this," she murmured. "Not really." My hands weren't steady. The lamp buzzed, then clicked to life, light spilling across us both. She exhaled, soft, almost relieved, and stepped back. But not far enough. Her living room was quiet, shelves lined with books, a framed photograph turned face down on the end table. I noticed but didn't ask. Instead, I glanced at her, at how she stood with her arms crossed, fingers pressing lightly against her elbow, as if bracing against something unseen. "You always help," I said, surprising myself. She tilted her head. "And you always notice." The words hung there, sharper than I expected. Then, the interruption. A knock at her door. Quick, familiar. She stiffened, then glanced at me before opening it. It was her cousin, the same one from the laundromat. Younger, lighter, all energy. She stepped inside without waiting, dropping a bag of takeout on the table. "Oh, you're here," she said when she noticed me. Her tone wasn't unfriendly, just pointed. I muttered a greeting, suddenly aware of how it must look. The lamp glowing between us, the half space I hadn't moved out of. Her cousin laughed lightly, tearing open the bag. "You two always in the middle of something." Something. The word lodged in me. I made an excuse to leave, but she followed me into the hall, closing the door softly behind her. For a moment neither of us spoke. "She doesn't mean anything by it," she said finally, her voice low. "I know." But my chest was tight. I didn't know if I was convincing her or myself. She looked at me then, longer than usual. Like she was weighing something. Her hand brushed the edge of the doorframe, then slipped lower, almost as if she might reach for me. She didn't. But her fingers still just inches away, suspended in hesitation. "You should go," she whispered, though it didn't sound like a dismissal. I nodded, but I didn't move. Not right away. The silence between us bent, taut and fragile, like one wrong word would snap it. I thought, just for a second, that she might lean closer. That I might. But she stepped back instead, closing the door with a softness that hurt more than a slam. It was late, but not so late the streets were empty. She'd asked if I wanted to walk with her. Just around the block, nothing more. After she came back from work. I said yes too quickly. The night was cool, quiet enough that our steps felt louder than they should. She carried her thermos as always, though she didn't drink from it. Just held it, like it gave her something to do with her hands. We ended up on a bench near the corner store. The street light above flickered, buzzing faintly. She sat first, shoulders slightly hunched, and I sat beside her with space in between that felt deliberate. I shouldn't. She started, then stopped. A long pause. I shouldn't spend this much time here. I tried to smile, though my throat tightened. With me, you mean? Her eyes flicked to mine, quick and sharp, then away. With anyone. It could look wrong. I nodded, though inside something pressed hard against my chest. You worry about what people think. She let out a small laugh, dry, almost bitter. Don't you? Maybe, I said, staring at the sidewalk cracks. But not about this. Her silence stretched. I felt her watching me. You're too young, she said finally, softly. That's the thing. That's always the thing. The words should have ended it. They didn't. I don't feel young, I answered, surprising myself. My hand brushed my knee nervously. Not around you. Her breath caught, barely audible, but there. She leaned back against the bench, eyes on the streetlight. You sound like him, she murmured. Who? My ex. She hesitated. Always trying to sound older than he was. Always trying to convince me he knew what he wanted. I swallowed. And did he? Another pause. Her fingers tightened around the thermos. No. That's why he left. The quiet pressed down on us. A car passed, headlights sweeping across the pavement, then fading. I thought about reaching for her hand, just to anchor something. But I didn't. Instead, I said, almost without thinking, You scare me sometimes. Her head turned sharply. Scare you? Yeah. I let out a shaky breath. Not because of what you do. Because of what I might. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. She set the thermos down between us, carefully, as if she needed both hands free. I don't want this to ruin anything, she whispered. I don't even know what this is. Neither did I. But the way her shoulder brushed mine then, just lightly, not pulled away, felt like an answer she couldn't say out loud. I shifted closer, not enough to close the space, just enough for her to feel it. She looked at me. Really looked. And for a moment, I thought the air between us might break. But she exhaled, turned her eyes back to the dark street, and asked, barely above a whisper, What are you hoping for? The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No knock at my door. No thermos in her hand on the stairs. The usual echoes, heels on concrete, the jingle of her keys, were gone. At first, I told myself she was busy. Work. Errands. But the silence grew heavy, like she had drawn a curtain I wasn't invited to look behind. I caught myself listening for her anyway. Pausing at the window when footsteps passed, checking my phone though she never texted me in the first place. On the fourth evening, I saw her in the courtyard. She was with someone else. A man, older than me, closer to her age. They stood near her car, talking quietly. She laughed at something he said, tilting her head in that way I'd only seen in fragments. My chest didn't break. It just tightened. I told myself it was nothing, just a friend, just conversation. But when she glanced up and noticed me watching from the hallway, her smile faltered. Quickly, deliberately, she looked away. That cut sharper than anything else. I avoided her after that. Skipped my usual walk, delayed laundry runs, let dishes pile up instead of taking trash out when I heard movement upstairs. One night, I found myself drafting a message. Just a simple, "You okay?" My thumb hovered over send. But the screen dimmed, and I let it. The words sat there unsent, accusing me. It wasn't until a week later that she appeared again, this time in the stairwell. I was heading down as she was heading up. We stopped midway, both unsure who'd step aside first. "You've been quiet," she said finally. Her voice was even, but her eyes flickered, like she wanted to read something in mine. "So have you," I answered. She gave a small, humorless smile. "My son's been staying with me. College break." The word son rang in my head longer than it should have. I hadn't imagined her with a child. I didn't know why it mattered, but suddenly the space between us felt wider. I nodded. "Makes sense." "Does it?" she asked, almost under her breath. But before I could answer, she shifted past me, the faint scent of her shampoo trailing behind. Back in my apartment, I sat staring at my phone again. Drafting, deleting. Drafting again. "I don't care. I just wanted to see you. I miss." Each time I stopped, the cursor blinked like it was mocking me. Finally, I locked the screen and set it face down. The message stayed unwritten. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened on a night that didn't feel like anything special. No rainstorm, no power outage. Just a quiet Tuesday, the kind where you notice the hum of the fridge too much. I was rinsing a mug when I heard the knock. Soft 3 taps. Not her usual rhythm. When I opened the door, she was standing there with her thermos cradled in both hands, like she needed something to hold on to. Her eyes looked tired, more than usual. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. We sat at my small kitchen table. I poured her tea from the same cheap box she never seemed to mind. She wrapped her hands around the cup, not drinking, just staring at the steam. Finally she said, "He's gone. My son. Back to campus." I nodded, waiting. She set the thermos down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the table, like she was buying time. "I thought it would be easier with him here." A distraction? A pause. "But it wasn't. I still noticed you weren't around." Her voice caught slightly on the last part. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. Just watched her trace the rim of the cup with her finger, circling it again and again. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "You are." My voice was steadier than I felt. Her laugh was soft, humorless. "Do you know how much space you take up in my head? And you shouldn't. You shouldn't at all." The words landed like a confession and a warning at once. "I think about you too," I admitted quietly. My hands tightened around my own cup. "Even when I try not to." She looked up then, really looked, and I felt everything I'd been holding back pressing forward. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was thick, crowded with all the things we'd left unsaid. She exhaled slowly, like surrender. "It scares me. The age. The difference. What people would say." "I know." My throat tightened. "It scares me too. But it doesn't feel wrong when it's just us." Her eyes softened at that. She reached across the table, hesitated, then let her hand rest near mine. Not touching. Just close enough that the space hummed. I turned my palm slightly, letting my fingers brush hers. Barely. That was all. A brush. A choice. We stayed like that, not speaking, the fridge humming, the tea cooling. Finally, she whispered, "So what do we do?" I almost said everything, almost said nothing. Instead, I let the silence hold. Then I squeezed her fingers lightly, the smallest answer I could give. She looked at me, eyes tired but gentler now, and gave the faintest smile. "Okay." Just that. And somehow, it was enough. It didn't happen all at once. There was no sudden shift, no moment where the air cleared and everything became easy. It happened slowly. A week later, I saw her again on the bench near the corner store, same flickering streetlight above us. She was sipping from her thermos, and this time she patted the spot beside her without saying a word. I sat. We didn't talk much. Just listened to the faint buzz overhead, our shoulders brushing lightly now and then. By then, silence between us no longer felt like distance. It felt like knowing. Routines shifted. Some mornings I found her waiting outside at 8:47 a.m., the exact minute I usually left for work. She always had tea. I always carried black coffee. We'd walk part of the way together, laughing quietly about nothing, her shoes squeaking on damp pavement, my coffee spilling just a little when I tried to keep up. Sometimes she'd come by after work, just to sit at my kitchen table. We rarely finished the tea, but the mug stayed warm between our hands. It wasn't about the tea anyway. It was about the sitting. About not being alone. There were complications still. Her cousin teased once. "You're spending too much time with him." She only smiled, brushing it off. I pretended not to hear, but later that night, when she left my apartment, she lingered in the doorway, eyes softer than her words. "It's not simple," she said. "I don't need simple," I answered. She held my gaze for a long second before whispering, "Good." Months blurred. Laundry cycles, late walks, evenings where she leaned against the counter while I cooked something barely edible. She'd laugh, call it almost food, and eat it anyway. I learned her son called less often, that she still folded grocery bags too neatly, that she hated the sound of ticking clocks. She learned I sketched when I couldn't sleep, that my mother left when I was young, that I never remembered to lock my bike properly. Small things. But the small things were everything. One night, back on that same bench, I asked without asking. "This?" I started, then stopped. She finished for me. "This is enough." And it was. Not perfect. Not clean. Not something we could name out loud without worry. But enough. She reached over, slid her thermos into my hand, and said, "Try it." I took a sip. Too sweet, too strong. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded, watching her smile like she knew. I didn't feel like life had changed in some grand way. I just felt steadier. Like I'd finally been folded into someone else's rhythm. And when she leaned her head briefly against my shoulder, I thought, this is what it means to be seen. 6.